Good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever the time you are listening to this podcast, as we welcome you into another episode of Broncos Brawl, episode 23. My name is Keegan Hartman. You can find me and follow me on Twitter at KeeganHartman1. Along with me today, first and foremost, he's back. It's been a while, but it's good to have you back, man. He played 6 seasons as a tight end for the Denver Broncos and helped them to win 2 Super Bowl championships. You know the name. You can find him on Twitter and Instagram at BC_Chamberlain. It is Byron Chamberlain. Byron,
it's been a while.
So
I've been
long,
good,
dude.
man.
How have you been?
Like I always say, man, just trying to stay COVID-free.
COVID-free, that's the motto. That is the summer motto. Well, it's good to have you, man. Glad that you're healthy and safe, and I'm happy to have you back on the show, man. So, with that being said, Byron's here. Alex is out. He's traveling. But to sub in for him, one of the head honchos of the Brawl Network. He is a contributor for Fansided's Del Windy City. Find him and follow him on Twitter at Usayd Koshul. He is Usayd Koshul. Usayd, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to be on here again with you and Byron. A little update on my social media. The last time I was on here was back in February, March. Byron told me to create an Instagram, so I've done that as well. You can follow me on Instagram at Usayd Koshul.
Yes. Make sure you find him on both. Find him and follow both of these guys on both. And heck, I'll just throw mine in there, at Keegan Wave. Enough of that. Enough of all the following shout-outs. So we got a lot to get into today, fellas, as we go down the line. We're kicking it old school a little bit. We originally, maybe a few episodes ago, we did a Twitter poll, kind of a Q&A, where we took some of our fans' Twitter questions and we answered them. Well, guess what? News is at a standstill. We really don't have much to talk about besides one big thing. So yeah, we're doing it again. We're taking your questions from Twitter. We posted it earlier this morning. Got a really great response. So we're going to get into that later on in the show. But first, we've got some business, as I said, and that pertains to the franchise tag man, Mr. Justin Simmons. So the safety and what we thought was going to be maybe, restructured, given a new deal, given his productivity over the duration of last year, you would think he was going to get an extension and everything was going to be great. Well, that didn't end up happening before Wednesday's deadline, in which teams are allowed to give their tagged players their new contracts. Not for Denver. Justin Simmons is playing under a 1-year, $11.44 million deal, franchise tag. He signed the franchise tag, long story short. And he's going to be playing under that. And after this, he's assumed an unrestricted free agent unless Denver can get back into negotiations with his party. Now, the assumption is he's going to want something in the ballpark of maybe 14 to 15 million, give or take. And Byron, I'm going to start with you, man. What was your reaction to him kind of not on the same page as the Broncos? It's sort of shocking to me. What did you think?
When these things don't happen, there's finger pointing on both sides, and who knows who's to blame. I know he came out with a statement saying if the Broncos wanted a long-term deal done, they would have gotten it done. For me, and I'm just going to speak from a player's perspective. As a player, you want that long-term deal. You want that long-term security. You want to be with the team that, you started your career with. So I know he's got to be a little disappointed that wasn't, they weren't able to work out a long-term deal. But it's interesting. It's interesting the scenarios that are the possibilities with this 1-year franchise tag. I mean, hopefully they can get back, he said his side and their side can get back to the negotiation table and hammer out a long-term deal. I don't know how long that is, the time period when they can actually go back to the table. Do they have to play out the entire contract year or sometime during the season? Could they come back and try to start negotiations? Hopefully they do and lock him up. I mean, he's been a great player for the Broncos as a third-round pick out of Boston College. He's still a young guy, 26 years old. So he's one of those pieces that you want to have as a foundation of your defense going forward. So I was a bit shocked that they didn't get it done. And I'm going to tell you this: I tend to side with the players being a former player. You see it all the time. When teams long-term deals done, whether guys have 1 year left on their deal, 2 years left on their deal, they'll rip up deals and get it done to lock up the players that they really want and players that they really feel like, okay, we can give him this long-term security with X amount of dollars. So kind of disappointed. I guess you asked what was my reaction. I guess I would say I was disappointed that the two sides didn't come to some sort of agreement.
100%, definitely a shock, I think, for everybody within Broncos country. Usayd, I'm going to ask you, because you have an overall perspective of the Broncos as a whole. I don't know your knowledge on the Broncos, but I'm gonna just do this openly and objectively, man. You look at guys like, I'll give you a couple safeties names. Jamal Adams, Kevin Byard, Tyrann Mathieu, I believe Tennessee Titans, Kevin Byard, that's how you pronounce it. Eddie Jackson. Of these guys, Justin Simmons came out of nowhere in the safeties list and was able to make a name for himself, so much so that he earned one of the top spots, matter of fact, the top spot as a coverage safety according to PFF. Like, he's got all the reason to be a high-paid player. Do you think he gets into the ballpark of where those safeties are making their money, be it in the $14 million to $15 million range at the end of this season?
I think, yes, he does. And the reason being is it's like Byron said, right? Both the sides want to get a deal done. For players, the first team that they're drafted to, that really holds a special place in their heart. When you look at it from like Simmons' perspective, I mean, listen, he's just trying to, what's the term today is it's like secure the bag, right? He wants a long-term deal. He wants the security. He wants something similar to like the 4-year, $58 million deal that Bears safety Eddie Jackson just got, right? So he knows, like, well, look, the money's going to be there for me for the next couple of years. From the team perspective, I think that, for head coach Vic Fangio, Simmons fits perfectly into what Fangio's trying to build in Denver. He's been in the league since 2016, so he's going into year 5 at this point. He's still just 26 years old, and so that's the kind of guy that you want to have on your team until he's in his early 30s, because like this Broncos team, you look at it right now, and especially they're entering a new era on one side of the ball with like Drew Lock and Noah Fant and, Philip Lindsay, those young pieces on offense. And then on defense, you have guys like Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. I mean, I know they lost Chris Harris Jr. this year, but from an overall like team perspective in terms of the defense, you want to have continuity, right? And you lost guys like Chris Harris Jr. this year. In free agency, you want to be able to bring Simmons back to keep the continuity going, because Fangio's defenses, whether it's in Chicago or San Francisco, in terms of talent and statistically overall, they've taken a big jump forward in year two, from like year 1 to year 2 and then year 3 onwards. So, yeah,
I think that when you think of Justin Simmons and how he fits into Fangio's system, he is the epitome of the, what do they say it? It's the cliche, the versatility. How do they define the secondary or the coverages and everything? It's flexible, it's versatile, it's a hybrid. You hear that a lot with Vic Fangio's defense, his schematics, and I think that Justin Simmons fits that. They call them a coverage safety for a reason. This man was all over the field for the Denver Broncos last year. I want to get in terms of, we go into next season. Let's just flash forward real quick. I want to go into next season and take a look at some of the, unrestricted free agents that we've got coming up. Byron, I'm going to start with you on how we rank these. These are for sure unrestricted free agents.
Well, Keegan, before we get into this, let me say this about Justin and Simmons and the Broncos not being able to come to a long-term agreement. Sometimes, and this has nothing to do with Fangio or the coaches, but sometimes when you're negotiating with, get people in the front office, the general manager, whether the owner's involved or whoever's involved with those negotiations and getting those type of deals done. And you mentioned something earlier. You mentioned he kind of came out of nowhere to become the player that he is. But sometimes the organization who drafts you, they always view you as that person that they drafted, that third round pick. He wasn't a first rounder. He wasn't a guy that they invested a lot into in the beginning. And like you said, he's come out of nowhere to kind of make himself this player that we look at as one of those top safeties in the NFL. But sometimes, organizations can't see you as any other way as what you were when they picked you up as a third round pick, and maybe not deserving of that type of contract. So maybe I hope not. I hope he doesn't have to go somewhere else to get paid and get his money and get long-term security. Like we've all said already, he's still a young guy who has got a lot of good years in front of him, and you want that type of guy as a key component on your defense moving forward.
Here's a few with contract options, restricted free agents and unrestricted, and basically, Byron or Usayd, I could start with either. I guess Usayd, I could ask you first, and then Byron will get back to you. Just rank them in terms of priority, I guess. So going down this list, you have Von Miller, who's going to be up for a contract option. Kareem Jackson's in the same boat. Justin Simmons will be an unrestricted free agent now. Todd Davis, unrestricted free agent. Brandon McManus, unrestricted free agent. Garrett Bowles, that's up in the air, unrestricted free agent. Devontae Bosby, unrestricted free agent. And then restricted free agent names includes A.J. Johnson and Phillip Lindsay. There is so much to focus on if you are the Denver Broncos going into next offseason. Usayd, where do you put your focus?
So I think number one focus is this. You got to bring back Von Miller because he's the face of the franchise right now. From there, you really have to prioritize, because if you don't bring back Justin Simmons, what's going to happen is you're either going to have to draft someone, or you have to believe that there is someone better than Simmons out there that you can let him walk and there can be an upgrade. Then you have to look into bringing back some of the core pieces that have been there the last couple of years, right? Like someone like Kareem Jackson or Todd Davis. I would seriously argue that there's a lot of talent in 2021 on the defensive side of the ball that could not be in a Broncos uniform when we do talk about the 2021 offseason, right? Like, let's just say you lose Simmons, Jackson, Todd Davis. Shelby Harris is another name that you want to be able to retain. So I think right now, like, when we're sitting here like 8-9 months away from the calendar being 2021 and teams having to talk to these players, like Miller and Simmons would be number one and number two on my list. And then you would kind of just have to go from there. And then a guy like Phillip Lindsay, right? This is interesting because he did come out of, like Simmons, right? Kind of came out of nowhere as an undrafted free agent. But you have to wonder, like, with the Broncos signing Melvin Gordon, right? And then a deep 2021 draft class coming up, would they let Phillip Lindsay walk if they viewed a guy like Travis Etienne or Chuba Hubbard as an upgrade? Or do they try to retain him because they believe, yes, some of the wear and tear is there, but we think that Phillip still has a lot of good years left ahead of him?
Byron, where do you rank your priority as far as that list goes? If you want, I can read it back.
Well, first off, Von Miller is future Hall of Famer, like you said, face of the franchise. He's a guy I think that you want as a lifelong Denver Bronco. You don't want Von Miller finishing his career in some other uniform. It would look terrible. That's number one. We've obviously talked about Simmons. For me, another player that I really like, and I think that he's a bit underrated for what he does and what he brings to our defense. It's Todd Davis. I like him. I really do, and he's a guy that's the signal caller on the defense. And I just think he's got to be a priority. I understand that you may feel like you can go out there and upgrade, get an upgrade or another player or whatever, but to me, you talked about continuity. He's that guy that brings that continuity to that defense, and he's just a bit underrated to me. But he would be a priority for me just to keep that signal caller, that solid guy in the middle in place.
100%. So I mean, this 2020 season is seriously going to be a huge deciding factor on what Denver is able to do, because now you really have to pick and choose. And next off season is really going to be slim pickings as far as what they can shop for and what they can bring back. I thought this off season was bad. Next off season is going to be a little bit more difficult. Now, granted, of course, you had those player options for Jackson and Miller. And then you also had, Philip Lindsay and A.J. Johnson, both listed as restricted free agents. So, take that with a grain of salt. That gives you a little bit of leeway, but not too much. I don't know, man. This is going to be a scary offseason. All right, so moving on. So getting into the Twitter stuff, the questions that you guys had on Twitter. We do have a few questions that we got. We got a lot of feedback, by the way, guys. So we'll go ahead and start here. I'm going to pick out a couple, and it looks like I've got one. This is one from @KTHen, KThen16. Breakout under the radar young Broncos player, I should say. I'll add in Broncos player, and that was their question. So breakout under the radar Broncos player. Byron, I'll start with you, man.
Breakout under the radar Broncos player. I think the breakout player is going to be our quarterback, Drew Lock. He's definitely not under the radar, but he teased us at the end of the year, showing a lot of ability, a lot of moxie, a guy that could play, as people say, beyond the playbook. When the playbook breaks down. And the play breaks down, can get out of the pocket, make plays, make throws, go on the road, win big games. I have this emblazoned in my mind, him against a good Houston Texans team down in Houston, and the way he performed. But he's definitely not under the radar. The spotlight is definitely going to be on him, but he's the guy that I think is going to have the breakout performance and the breakout year. Another guy that I would put out that I would say would be the rookie Jerry Jeudy. A lot's going to be asked out of him, he was a star at Alabama, and he's going to be one of the reasons I feel that Drew Lock has the breakout season, and I think he has a great rookie year. And like I said, a lot's going to be asked out of him playing on the other side of Cortland Sutton. But I feel like he's got all the talent and all the ability to make that happen.
Usayd, what say you, man?
So I think my breakout guy is going to be tight end Noah Fant. I thought that last year in the Broncos games that I watched, he did really, really well. I think that he's going to develop into like that kind of security blanket as well as that mismatch weapon for this offense. And I think that his skill set, it's crazy, right? Because I, back in like November, predicted that the Broncos were going to draft Jerry Jeudy in round 1 because he was a perfect complement to Cortland Sutton. I think that this trio that's kind of forming of Sutton, Noah Fant, and Jerry Jeudy, I think it's got easily one of the chances to be like one of the best receiving trios in the NFL. I think my under the radar guy would be another wide receiver that they drafted in the second round this year, KJ Hamler. So I was super high on Hamler coming out of Penn State. I think that he definitely adds a lot more speed to this offense. Is going to be another great weapon for Drew Lock. So those are kind of my two guys to really watch out for in 2020. Disclaimer, I wanted to say Drew Lock, but like kind of don't want to pick him because everyone seems to pick their young quarterback to break out in year 2.
Well, I'm going to stay on the offense, but I'm going to go a little bit off track what you guys said. I'm going to say Lloyd Cushenberry. Everybody tends to forget that they brought in a guy who was arguably, I would say, the first best. If you want to go ahead and put competition head to head, Tyler Biadasz out of Wisconsin, I believe, was the number one guy. And then you also had the kid from Oklahoma. I can't remember his name to save my life. But when I look at Lloyd Cushenberry, one thing I'm looking at is the competition he went up against. He went up against top-rated defensive tackles within the SEC everywhere you look. So I think Lloyd Cushenberry brings that scrappiness. He brings versatility to Mike Munchak's offense. That man was pounding the table. I can tell you right now, Mike Munchak was licking his chops for this pick, and you got him so late. You got him for a steal in the 4th round, I believe. So I really like Lloyd Cushenberry's chances to come out and shine, especially you add Graham Glasgow to the mix, and then you got Dalton Reisner, who's already proven to be a young star. The only real concern that you have is at your tackle positions, and let me say tackles, because Jawan James is normally up in the air any other given day. You don't know if he's going to be 100%, and then Garrett Bowles, you never know. I mean, his back four of the season might be good, and his first 12 might be horrible. So we'll see how that pans out. But I think as far as the interior line goes, Lloyd Cushenberry is a lock, and he's one of the main reasons that this Broncos offensive line goes into the top. I would say my bet is top 5, top 10 offensive lines in the NFL. I think that's fair to say. I don't know about you guys.
I don't know. We'll see, man. Interesting.
All right. So moving on, we got another one here, and I think it was also K-Vin as well. So, what would you consider a successful season for Denver? What would you consider a successful season for Denver? Byron.
Are you going to start with me?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Super Bowl or bust? No. Everything is a process, and I remember, when I came into Denver, my first year we went 8-8. The next year we went 13-3, and we lost in the first round of the playoffs. The year after that, we won the Super Bowl. So, my expectation is to take that next step. Take that next step towards a winning record, whether that's 9-7 or somewhere in there. I hopefully we can grab one of the playoff spots and see our young players, our young quarterback, our young tight end. You mentioned Noah Fant, and see how these guys progress and how they play under playoff pressure. To me, that would be a huge stepping stone for the Broncos, if they could somehow secure a playoff spot. So that's kind of my expectation for them this season, and hopefully, how it goes. If it's a home playoff game, maybe we get a win in there. And so, but just to take that next step, to be able to get in the playoffs and play with that playoff pressure. I think that's my realistic expectation of the Broncos.
Expectations, Usayd?
So expectations, kind of like Byron, I think is just steady incremental improvement, because you talk about a team that was 3-3 in the division last year. I think that in order to get to the playoffs, first you have to win at least 4 or 5 divisional games, right? So we got to kind of, first things first, the Broncos have to go ahead and not necessarily dethrone the Chiefs, but kind of prove that, we are capable. We have enough well-rounded team. that's going to be able to challenge Mahomes and Andy Reid. And then I think the big thing to kind of keep in mind is growth on both sides of the ball, right? So that's growth from Fangio and Donatel on the defensive side of the ball, and then also just tons of growth from Pat Shurmur. I think that Pat Shurmur gets a bad rep around the league just because, like, he was in with the Giants for 2 years, had 2 losing seasons. A lot of this stuff was not his fault. When you look at him as an offensive coordinator with, like, Philadelphia, for example, and I think Minnesota as well, he did really well there. So he's a guy that knows how to utilize the talent. I think that Shurmur being able to develop a lot of these younger players in 2020, it's going to really raise the bar for Broncos country. I'm going to go ahead and say that they win 9 to 10 games, because there's a lot of teams right now, a lot of games on the schedule you look at that I would straight up classify as very winnable.
I would have said that last year too. I'm going to say this before we even get to, winning the playoffs, getting to the Super Bowl, which is fine and dandy, and being able to claim ourselves in the AFC West as, a dominant team. We have to first win these close football games that we somehow go all the way up till the end with, and we somehow just crack. We bust within, the final 4 minutes. We blow the lead, and we end up, the Broncos end up losing by 7, 14. Close, incremental, like, you should have won this game. It was just one simple error. And I think once you get the formula to that down, you're able to beat these teams and you're able to manage these leads, which I think Pat Shurmur will do a great job, do a better job than Rick Scangarello. Then you can take that next step and you can graduate into focusing on, okay, we know we're good. Let's get into the now let's focus on, the postseason, the stakes and everything. Then you can start to have that focus. But at its core right now, the main focus this season is learning how to win those manageable football games. And both of you guys, like you alluded to it, you were pretty much on the head. We're in the same boat. So I think that if they can manage those games offensively and defensively and play sound, then it's going to be one hell of a show in the AFC West. That's what I think.
Right. And just to kind of add on to your point, there's being able to win these super close games. So I've got like the 2019 schedule up in front of me. I mean, they lost 4 games last year by, 4 points or less, if I just did the math correctly right there on the fly. And you look at those losses, I mean, you lost to Chicago by 2. They lost to Jacksonville by 2, lost to the Colts by 2, and then lost to the Vikings by 4. So there's a lot that you look at and realize that, all right, forget the 7-9 record. They were in a lot of these games last year, and they proved that, yeah, despite the fact that we're a young team, we can still hang with pretty much anyone.
Well, yeah, and Keegan, that's what I wanted to add too. The fact that there's 4 games in there that were winnable last year, and you hit the nail on the head. Getting to that point where you win those games, those 2 4-point games, those games that are touchdown or less, you find a way to come out with a victory, and that is the difference between a playoff team and a team that sits at home and watches the playoffs. So, and I believe the Broncos take that next step. I really do. I believe I think our defense is a little bit better this year because of our offense will be a little bit better this year. I think we have more explosive weapons than we've ever had. Now, granted, a lot of these weapons are very young and very unproven, but I think that they're going to eventually this year figure it out and figure out how to make plays and be more explosive than what we've seen in the past couple of years with our Broncos offense. And so I feel like they'll win those type of games. You just mentioned 4 games right there that I think that in that scenario coming forward, rolling forward, Broncos win three of those 4 games. Mm-hmm. And that takes you from 7 wins to 10.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I mean, you look back, I think, Usayd, you hit it on the head, man. Going back, I flash back to Minnesota. I flash back to Jacksonville. I flash back to Indianapolis. The Indianapolis game from last year plays in my head. And it's like, I think it all falls back on the offensive coordinator. I think that now that Skranks is out of there, I think you're in a much more better situation, much more feasible situation. Now that Pat Shurmur, a guy who had experience prior to this position at OC and head coach and proven success, I think now that you have a guy like that in the shoes of your OC, like filling that void, yeah, I think you're destined for something. So we'll have to wait and see, but I'm excited. I'm excited to see what Pat Shurmur can do with Drew Lock going into the 2020 season. That is, if there is a 2020 season. Fingers crossed. So, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. And let me just add on regarding Pat Shurmur, because I can tell you guys this now, that back in like January, he was actually, I think, one of the most coveted offensive coordinators around the league, because like, you know, I have sources with the Bears, and I heard that the Bears were going after him. I heard that he was pissed off at the Giants, so he got an offer from the Eagles to reunite with Doug Peterson, and then obviously with the Broncos come calling. So I think this is someone that, like, Broncos fans just, give Pat Shurmur a chance, because his offense has proven to work when it's got a lot of talent, and he's a highly coveted name that I think the entire fan base is going to fall in love with, like, from week one onwards.
All right. I guess we'll put a pin on that one. So the next question I came across was from Orange and Blue Mama. Who would you pick for your franchise QB in their prime? That's a fun one. Byron, I'm going to start with you on this one again. John Elway.
No, in with me.
Huh? In with you? Okay. All right, I'll let you think about this one. Who would you pick for your franchise QB in their prime? John Elway or Peyton Manning? Usayd, you can have the floor, man.
Man, that one's tough. I think, because I was in diapers when John Elway was playing, right? So I grew up most of the time watching Peyton Manning, but I would definitely say, I would pick Elway, because in the context of like the Broncos, I think that this is someone, who spent pretty much like his whole career in Denver and is like really a franchise icon. And I would also say this, that John did what he did at a time when the NFL definitely was just like much like rougher, if I can put it in those terms, like much harder to play in compared to like all the technology that kind of we had in like the 2000s and we currently have. So yeah, I would go with John.
And then there was two.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Where do you want me to start?
Woo. Oh, here we go.
Wait. Let me make sure I hear the question right.
Okay. Quote unquote. Who would you pick for your franchise QB in their prime? John Elway or Peyton Manning?
All right. Where do you want me to start, or why I would pick John Elway?
Take us down the line, man.
Franchise. Huh?
I said, take us down the line. Bless us with the knowledge.
Well, he just alluded to it. It was a different type of NFL. The NFL was a different game when the Elway played. It was definitely a running league. It was a 3-yard cloud of dust on first down, second down, and let's throw it on third down type of league back then. And that's why, when you saw guys like Elway and Marino, when they came into the league and guys saw them putting up crazy, ridiculous passing numbers, it was just so jaw-dropping. And you got to realize this, too. The beginning of John's career, he played under Dan Reed, one of the most conservative coaches I've ever seen in the league. Besides Marty Schottenheimer, who's probably the most conservative guy ever, Dan's right behind him. Mm-hmm. And so for John, a lot of times, you talked about the fourth quarter comebacks or whatever. It's like they were playing so conservative and got far behind so many times that John had to bail the team out in the fourth quarter to win games. So, I mean, that's number one for me. That's not even number one, but that's one reason. My number one reason, he's my guy. He's my quarterback. He's I'm like T.O. right now with crying. That's my quarterback. That's my quarterback, man. And he's a good friend, the most competitive guy I've ever seen. And I know Peyton as well too. I got to meet Peyton during his time in Denver, and have much respect for Peyton Manning. But if you're gonna make me choose, I'm choosing my guy every time. And I don't want to have to pull out those Super Bowl trophies again and show you why I would take John. Super Bowl 32 and Super Bowl 33. Those to me were my most special moments in the NFL, and those don't happen without number 7 for sure. I mean, he and you alluded to it. He is spending his whole career in Denver, and if you live in Denver, or if you're a Broncos fan, you understand what that man means to the franchise. You understand what he means to the city of Denver. You understand what he means to the state of Colorado. You understand what he means to the whole Rocky Mountain region. There's no when you think Broncos, you think that's the first person that comes to your mind, number 7. There's been a lot of great Broncos. Shannon Sharp, Terrell Davis, Steve Atwater. But when you say the Denver Broncos, the one name that comes up is John Elway. So I'm taking Elway in my prime, and I'm smoking a victory cigar with him after Super Bowl 33 again.
You
remember that story, don't you?
That was pretty good. That was pretty good reasoning right there. You just had 2 reasons: Super Bowl 32 and 33. But hey, I'm gonna say this: I did not grow up in the John Elway era. Unfortunately, I didn't. I only got YouTube videos, just like I got them for Jordan. And then I did grow up during the Peyton Manning era, so I did get to see what Peyton Manning was about. But when I go back and I watch those YouTube videos, you're talking about the prime. So obviously this probably would have been about the early to mid 90s. And when you think of John Elway, you think about him against the Cleveland Browns in the playoffs, him evading tacklers. And this is a much more hard-nosed decade of football we're talking about in the early 90s. From what I've watched, okay, I did not, again, let me preface, I did not grow up. You played in that, Byron. I am not from that era. It was way less secure than what it is now, and it was a lot more hard-nosed. And I just look at John Elway's playmaking ability and ability to extend the play and ability to evade tacklers, ability to, throw it when he needs to. And when I mean throw it by a mile. The man's got a cannon for an arm. And then I just look at his leadership. I was watching those highlights from Super Bowl 33, and I just couldn't help but notice how interactive he was on the sideline with his teammates, like just pumping him up. Like I felt like he was going to go out there with his helmet off and just headbutt somebody. Like that's how hyped he looked. And so when I see that, all things considered, and I'm not taking anything away from Peyton, the sheriff, because he's the man, but I'm saying John Elway wins this one, and it's not even close.
It's funny. I can go on and on and on, and reasons that I'll tell you. We can talk about John. You talked about his leadership. Leadership off the charts. And I can say the same for Peyton. I talk about how competitive he is. He's the most competitive person that I've ever met in my life. Just hated to lose more than he loved to win. And I know that's a cliche, but that is the truth when it came to John. And just, the guy would do any and everything possible to win a game and to win a championship. And, I remember, I'll take you back to Super Bowl 32, the helicopter play. That was, we talked about earlier, playing beyond the playbook. That's something that we had practiced that play all week. They told us, okay, 100%, they're going to be playing this defense, and they come out and they're playing a different defense. We had never seen the defense that they line up like that ever, all year, the whole 1997 football season. So John goes out and makes a play, but when he dives and throws his body on the line, you're like, God, we got to give it up. Just like he's giving it up. We got to put our bodies on the line. We got to do everything we got to do. And so just the ability to inspire his teammates, not just the team, but, the fans, the whole franchise, man, it's incredible. Now let me say this, too, and I'll jump off of it. If you choose Peyton Manning, you're not losing.
No.
Peyton Manning is one of the greatest ever to stand behind the center and throw a football in this league. So you're not going wrong with any of those choices. You're not losing. Just for me, John's my guy. So that's why I'm picking John.
I think there are two different styles here. You know, you look at a guy who, and I'm speaking on Peyton here, who is a mentally just gifted and very intelligent when it comes to the game. And John Elway, I'm sure, carries that same mentality and has the same sharpness. But I feel more so Peyton would have that edge in terms of the chalk talk. This is just an opinion. And then John Elway, you look at his physical ability to extend a play, to be able to utilize his athleticism. He would risk his body to win. I feel like they both carry the traits, but it's more evident in each quarterback than the other. So that's just where I stand on it.
I mean, listen, I'll say this much, right? Like, much of Peyton's legacy was always like with the Indianapolis Colts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whereas you compare it to, and then he came to Denver and like won the, you know, I mean, Peyton went to 2 Super Bowls with Indianapolis and 2 with Denver, right? But, like, much of his legacy was with the Colts from the time he was drafted to basically when he was released, right? Whereas, like, with John, it was all just, you know, from 83 to 98 was just all Denver. And so I think, like, really fans have, like, older fans especially, will just have a much deeper appreciation for all that, like, John did for Denver. And I'm just saying that. Do not, just to say this, right? Don't, you know, take Peyton Manning for granted either.
We don't.
No,
we don't, man. Listen. I would have loved to play with Peyton. You know, like I said, he you know is going to make the list. When you put the list of quarterbacks, he's got to be in your top 3, 4 at the lowest. So. Either one of those guys that you choose, you're not losing with. So I respect Peyton so much as a quarterback and then as a competitor. A guy that had the type of surgery he had, you know, with the neck, and then coming back and the type of leader he is, the type of teammate he is. And you know, you talk to the guys who played with him in Indianapolis. You guys talk to the guys in Denver who played with him. They absolutely love him. They said, you know, they would tell you there's no better teammate to have than Peyton Manning. So I respect him tremendously. He is. I'd probably pick him as my number 3 quarterback, but I'm riding with Elway all day, man. I've always have since 1995 when I was drafted in Denver, and I always will.
Well, guys, I mean, I don't know.
Next topic.
Next topic. Okay, I'm sifting through here, seeing what else we can grab. Usayd, I noticed that you did have one that I'm going to bring it up. So you wrote this one. I appreciate your contribution, Usayd. You said, what areas does Drew Lock need to grow in throughout the 2020 season for him to move one step closer to being a franchise quarterback? It's a good question. It's a real good question. I think that was
Keegan, you take it. You take it first.
I think that was intended for Alex, but obviously he's not here. Yeah, I will definitely take that question. I thought about this one. I marinated with this one a little bit today because of, you know, me being around him during my freshman year of college, watching him come out of Mizzou and then grow that year and then grow into this year. I can tell you this much. He's already proven himself as a competitor in this league in just 5 games. Beyond the competition, you can say that the competition was weak. You can say that, you know, all you played was Houston, and when you played a good team like Kansas City, you got burned. Well, I mean, you come back better than ever. You don't have Rick Scangarello. His ability to transition from one playbook to another, if you are a fan of Mizzou, Byron, you played at Mizzou. You know what I'm
Hey,
talking about.
how many offensive coordinators did he go through?
He went through three. At his time, and he stayed his senior year to be with Derek Dooley. Like, as if a transition wasn't hard. He was like, yeah, I want to learn how to play at a pro level. It's basically how it sounded. And so here he is playing with a guy who's had, success at the pro level, coming over from Dallas, and he sells this pitch to Drew Lock. Drew decides to stay his senior season and just ends on a remarkable career at Mizzou. 12,000 yards, second behind Aaron Murray from Georgia. And that's besides the point. Let's get back to the real conversation. I'm flaunting. So when you talk about Drew Lock and his capability, sky's the limit. He can't go down. He just goes up. I don't think there's really a bust factor here. If you were looking for me to say that, I think you can go ahead and eliminate that because he's already proven what he's been capable. It was just a highlight, really. And that might sound a little subjective, but I'm being upfront with you. I think that Drew Lock is the guy that you want at this current moment. And as much as I want this, I've been reading into it maybe a little bit too much. MVPs, second-year quarterbacks are winning the MVP. As much as I would like for that to happen, I know it's probably kind of a little bit of a long shot given his circumstances and how young the team is. But I'm not ruling it out. I think that Drew Lock, he's the guy, A, and B, he's got the talent around him to thrive. And Pat Shurmur was that icing or the cherry on top, if you will, to this offense. I think you're about to see just a full You got to see a little snippet last season. You're about to see the entire thing go down in the 2020 season. I think Drew Lock is the real deal. Holyfield.
All right, give me the question one more time.
I went on a little bit of a rant, didn't I, Byron? I'm sorry. Okay. All right. What areas does Drew Lock need to grow in throughout the 2020 season for him to move one step closer to being a franchise QB?
So, when you think about Drew Lock, and you and I had the privilege of following his career at the University of Missouri, he's a guy with tremendous arm talent, and he relies a lot on that arm talent, and especially deeper throws, pushing the ball down the field. What I would love to see him do this year in the development, I would love to see is him just getting the ball out of his hand quicker, the shorter to intermediate routes, getting the ball. You mentioned Noah Fant earlier, getting the ball to Noah Fant, getting the ball out to a Philip Lindsay or a Melvin Gordon in the flat, getting the ball to these playmakers and giving them the ability to catch and run with the ball. It's going to take a lot stress off of him. It's also going to boost his completion percentage by taking easier throws and not always having to push the ball down the field to get big plays or to get big yards. So that's the one area that I would love to see him take strides in, really just kind of getting the ball out your hand as fast as you can, getting the ball into your playmakers' hands and letting them do the heavy lifting. You don't always have to throw it, 40, 50 yards down the field to get a big play. So that's the one area that I see. And that's the, not to bring the Chiefs into this, but that's the one area I saw Patrick Mahomes make. That's the big jump I saw him make. He understood that he had playmakers, and he's the same guy with the type of arm talent that is rare. But, when you can get the guys the ball, when you can get a Judy the ball, a KJ Hamler, a Noah Fant, you got your guys in the backfield, Philip Lindsay, Melvin Gordon. If you get those guys, they can make big plays for you. So that's the one area I would love to see him improve on or develop this year.
Did that answer your question?
It actually did. I'm going to jump in and say, since it was my own question, I don't want to go ahead and answer because obviously it was intended for Alex and then, you guys. So I was surprised you even picked mine considering I'm filling in for Alex tonight.
My bad. Hey, man,
Good,
I thought it was a good question. I thought it was a real good question. So, yeah, I think unless anybody else has anything else to say or add in, that kind of puts a conclusion to for this episode of Broncos Brawl. I will say this. Make sure you follow these gentlemen. Usayd at Usayd Koshul on Instagram and Twitter, and Byron at BC_Chamberlain on Instagram and Twitter as well, and then me at Keegan Hartman1 on Twitter. So, gentlemen, unless you have anything else to say, we can put a pin in this one.
I'm good, man. I gotta take my youngest brother driving because he's getting his license soon. So thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, pleasure having you, Usayd. Thank you for coming in and filling in for Alex. And Byron, once again, man, it was great seeing you. Great having you on the show. All right, so that's going to conclude it here, guys. Make sure to follow the podcast's Twitter at Broncos Brawl. Thank you, and have a great rest of your weekend.